Good evening and welcome to Open Minds podcast, Waking the Dead Ghost Stories. This evening we have the most amazing ghost story, okay? When murder travels through time. My guest tonight will be Micheal Feely. I've had him on my shows for his own personal journey, but he has a most amazing ghost story to share. So I would like you to settle down, make your coffee, get your nibbles, wrap up warm. And if you feel like asking questions, please put them in the chat and I will ask Micheal or I will reply myself. So, without further ado, tonight's case number 5, when murder travels through time. Welcome, Micheal, to Open Minds podcast, Waking the Dead Ghost Stories.
Thank you very much. I've even turned the lights down just to create an ambience. But thank you. It's a pleasure, and it's good to be here.
Oh, great! I can't wait. I know. I've got a brief intro to this ghost story. Micheal emailed me, but I do not know all the details, and I didn't reread the email today because I just want to be as excited and like shocked as the rest of you. I will do my best to ask the questions, the pertinent questions on your behalf. First of all, though, before we go into this deep story, I'm going to give you an introduction. Here we go. During my wife's childhood, Micheal talking, Sarah, her housing estate was situated upon a previous Victorian farmland. Her house was known as the Haunted House due to many strange events there. Over to you, Micheal.
Well, thank you. Yes. And this particular story, I would actually cite as my major spiritual awakening. Even though I'd seen and experienced things leading up to this event, this was really what I would pinpoint as being the reason that my life turned 360 degrees. And this is the reason that I'm here speaking to you now. It's a story where I actually come in quite late, but I bore the brunt of the worst of the experience. So what happened is when my wife Sarah was growing up, she used to live on a housing estate, and as you said in the introduction, it was situated, it was built upon farmland from a Victorian era. So her housing estate used to be was on farmland that used to be in Victorian times. And many things she described to me and told me that many things happened. It was described as the haunted house of the street. And many things happened. And she would cite things where she'd be walking down the staircase and she would see hands manifesting at the wall trying to trip her up.
Oh,
she would have family round, and there was one incident where she and members of family were sitting downstairs, and one of her, I think it was one of her close relatives, the cousins or something like that, a little boy, went upstairs into the bedroom to play by himself. And sometime later he came downstairs and says, "Can you tell that girl upstairs that I don't want to play anymore?" And he's like, what? Who?
What happened then with everybody?
What girl? So everybody sort of, their eyeballs became like rabbits in headlights. And it's like, well, there's nobody up there, so what are you really talking about? And this kind of thing continued. And there's many other things where that here, sort of baby staircase gates banging and different things would happen. And this really continued throughout her childhood with many similar experiences to this, hands coming out of walls and trying to trip her up down the stairs, which is not very nice. And as she went into her teens and her early 20s, she went to see a medium who
Mhm.
was a friend of family, and this medium kept referring to this girl that actually looked like my wife, and
Wow.
she kept saying that this, ironically, she kept saying that Sarah Johnson or Sarah Jensen. So she's saying she actually looks like my wife, and she's got the same first name as my wife Sarah, and she's saying that there's this girl around you that keeps saying she wants you to look into her death, uh, and I quote, "She was taken by the hands of another."
She
And
was
this,
murdered. You mean she was murdered?
well, she was murdered, but her phrase or her terminology was that she was taken by the hands of another, which obviously means the same thing, but it was
Yes.
different. It was different terminology. I don't know if that was terminology of the time,
Hmm.
but this was sort of mixed in with other parted relatives that were coming into the reading as well, and it was kind of left at that at that time. Anyway, when my wife and I met, and we were both police officers when we met. We met in 2006 because we ended up again by the chess moving pieces of spirit. We
Hmm.
ended up on the same team. We ended up working together quite a lot, and as a result of that, we ended up becoming part of a relationship together. And it was when I joined in that relationship with her that my introduction to this started to happen.
Okay.
And nevertheless, a couple of maybe a couple of years later, after having met, I was aware of the story. I was aware of all the happenings that had occurred at the Howell House, and we decided that we wanted to go to the same medium. So we had a reading on the same night, but at different times, one after the other. And during my reading, the same medium turned around to me and said, "There's a girl around that wants you to look into her death because it was covered up." So now she's saying the same thing to me as she
Hmm.
was saying, as she says to my wife in a reading many years ago. And there's no way that she could have remembered that because it was many years ago, and this was my first meeting with her and my first ever
Okay, hold
reading.
on a second. First of all, I've got an echo. Do you have a phone near the computer? I muted mine. I've got an echo here. I do apologize, guys. Maybe someone's trying to stop me talking. How's that?
I can
Okay,
that sounds good for me.
that sounds a bit better. I've got a bit of an echo. That sounds a lot better. So
Excellent.
I've got to ask this question before we go any further. When she asked your wife to look into her death at the hands of another, your wife was not a police officer then, she was a child herself. And then later on, when you linked up with your wife, you were both police officers then. And this time at your reading with the medium, this young girl's asked you to look into the murder of the death, look into her death. Would you say because she either knew or at the time your wife would become a police officer, but it seemed a bit like, does that make sense to you, Michael?
It makes sense. Obviously, this girl in the unseen, in the unmanifest, continued to be around my wife, and
Hmm.
obviously continued to be around wherever wherever she went and wherever she resided. And when I had my reading, she said the same thing to me that she'd said to her several years
Okay.
previous. So she said this girl, and because I sort of guessed what she was talking about because my wife had told me
Hmm.
about this, and I said okay. And then again, this was sort of mixed in with other readings, with other relatives coming through. And after me, my wife then had a individual reading on the same, as I say, straight after me
Hmm.
on the same evening, but by herself. And the medium again said that this girl was around her too, and she wanted her to look into her death. So she's now asking the two of us through the
Two of
same
you.
through the
Can
same
I
medium at
ask?
different times.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, and I do apologize for the echo, guys. It must be the spirit world. Um, do you think with the hands coming out the walls and trying to trip her up and all of the goings on before, was the young girl not being nasty but trying to get your wife's attention?
Well, this will be answered later on.
Sorry. Okay,
No,
I'm just
no,
asking.
no.
How exciting! Do go on.
It is. So we sort of had the reading. We went back home. We discussed it, and we said obviously because of this girl's persistence. I mean, we were told, or my wife was told that she was 14, so we knew that she was a teenage girl, but we didn't know what had happened, the date, the time, and anything like that until obviously later on in the story. So we
Mhm,
went home and we discussed it, and we said, okay, well, we now have a name. We know that she's died because she's told us. So we have a
mhm,
name. We know that someone has died. They have asked us to
mhm,
look into her death. We know both police officers. We are quite
mhm,
adept at looking into things, at investigating things.
mhm,
So let's do it. What date shall we start from? Well, the housing estate where you lived was probably built around about the time of the Second World War. So
mhm,
why don't we go to our local central library, look at all the deaths under that name from the time of the Second World War, when your housing estate was roundabout built, up until the
mhm,
present day. So we went, we did that. We literally spent the whole day looking at all these slides and files of every single death in England,
mhm.
Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the whole of
Gosh.
the UK, from the
Mhm,
Second World War to the present day, and we couldn't find anything under that name for
okay.
deaths in the UK. And we spent the whole day there. Okay, so we said, all right, well, let's go back, let's reconvene. We've not been able to find anything based on the information that we have. Let's go and discuss and see what's going to happen. We began to have a lot of issues, a lot of poltergeist issues in our house. And there's just a couple of examples. The
Yes,
the, the
please.
one the one day I was sitting on the sofa and Sarah was sitting on the sofa with me. And in our living room then, we live in a different house now, but the room then we had a 6 foot double glazed window that
Mhm,
led out onto like a patio area, which then led out to a public alleyway
mhm,
that ran alongside it. And we were just sitting there having a laugh and a joke, and as we normally did. And all of a sudden, the glass shattered. We thought that someone had thrown a stone or something from the public
yeah.
alleyway, and we literally just darted all the way around, and there was no one inside.
Oh
So
my
we,
lord.
obviously quite peeved because someone had just we felt some kids or something had smashed our window. So we come back into the house, and to our surprise, when I actually examined the window, it had been smashed from the inside out, and you could actually see almost a pinpoint, probably the size of a British 10 pence piece,
Yeah.
where there was an impact mark. And that impact mark had actually shattered the 6 foot double glazed window from the inside. So quite clearly, it wasn't anything that had happened from the outside coming over to us. There'd been, following that, there'd been circumstances when again I'd been sitting on the same sofa, and I'd felt an attempted possession of my body,
Wow.
and I was getting tunnel vision. I was feeling very, very strange. It felt like there was an actual shadow entering me. It was making me extremely angry. I was very
Mhm,
agitated and very angry. But somehow, somewhere in the depths of me, I somehow knew what was happening, and I managed to actually fight off the attempted
mhm.
possession, and it dissipated and it went. We'd have these kinds of occurrences that would be happening. So
Can I ask you on that one? From obviously, I'm a medium, and with the experience I have, did you have a realization that the? I do apologize for the echo, guys. It's the spirit world. Did you have a realization when this was happening to you that the anger and the emotions you were feeling were not yours, it was the spirit that was very, very angry?
Well, again, that turns out to be the case, and that leads on to the grand finale. But what kind of happened from then? We had a lot of strange things happening, and we went for Sunday lunch. My wife and I went for Sunday lunch, and
Mhm.
it just so happened that this small restaurant, which was the same place that we'd had our reception, our wedding reception, it was
Yeah.
empty, and there's just my wife and I in there, and we were having a private conversation, or so we thought, and we were discussing this. Well, we've gone as far as we can. We can't find anything in relation to this girl who has given us her name as Sarah Jensen. We can't
Mhm.
find anything in the area since the Second World War to the present day for this name. I think now that we've done as much as we can, should we call it quits? And as I say, we believe that was.
Okay. Oh, you still there? Oh, I think I could have lost Michael. Hold on a second. I told you the spirit world is very active tonight. Just waiting for Michael to return. And I was getting well into that. So hold your horses, everybody. Isn't it always the way? It's expected to happen. I'm going to message him. I'm unable to hear him and see what comes back. How exciting live shows. So just hold on there. We will be with you. Um, so we don't forget, he's now in the restaurant. I mean, it's just like me. I want to predict what's coming next. They've gone through, trailed through all the books, looking for all the deaths. I think he's gone out. He's going to come back in, and they've decided to stop the search. I'm dreading what he's going to come back with, because I'm sure the spirit at that time would not allow such a thing to happen. But as I said, I've got to wait for Michael to return. He's out of the broadcasting studio, obviously having internet problems. So I will just chat away. I mean, last week, we had an amazing ghost story with Vale, and the questions it posed about the synchronicities. I thank you for the contribution. Hold your horses. I think Michael's on his way back.
I am
Uh,
back. Sorry
you
about
are
that.
back. Well done. Well done. Let's just get this all set up. There we go.
Someone's trying to stop me.
Yeah, someone's trying to stop you talk. I can see that. So, but that's fine. Right, we're back. We're back now. Off you go.
Lovely. Just to continue, so the radiator went freezing cold. There was a really, really eerie atmosphere in the house. We could
You were
smell
in the
flowers.
restaurant. You were in the restaurant.
No, we'd
Decide.
actually, yes, we were in the restaurant deciding that basically we can't take this any further, which we
That's it.
believe
That's what we
was
were.
a
Okay,
private
cool.
conversation. We went home. It was a February sort of late afternoon, early evening.
Yeah,
So it was free. It was cold. So my wife stood by the radiator, which was quite warm. And as she stood there, it went completely freezing cold in an instant. We began to smell flowers, which again is not horrific by itself, but with all things, it was really, really horrible,
yeah,
uncomfortable atmosphere. So I rang the psychic medium who had
yeah,
given us the readings, because she did say during the readings that if you do have any problems, if you need me, give me a call and I will
yeah,
help. So I called her up and said, basically, we do need your help. Can I come and get you tomorrow, because these things are now happening. It's basically getting really eerie and not very nice. So
yeah,
she said, yes, I can help you. And while I'm on the phone to her, I said, no, actually, it's gone okay again now. It's quite all right. And she says, yeah, that's because she's here now with me, telling me that you promised you'd help and you haven't. So
Ah, there
so
you
so
go.
so, so this girl had actually gone to the medium and then come back. And when she came back, that's when she's actually here with me now, because I can feel her. But that's when she, again, the atmosphere was very, very eerie. And I said to the medium, can you ask her just to, give us a peaceful evening? And she said, I'll try my best, but I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah,
So As I put the phone down again, things got even more eerie and more uncomfortable. So much
Mm-hmm.
so that we said we can't stop in this house anymore.
Oh God.
We need to, you now have two police officers who have seen everything there is to see, and we're now having to leave our house because there's things
Yeah.
happening that we can't see. So
Understandable. Understandable. Yes, understandable. Do
so
go
we,
on.
we, we decided to go to Sarah's mum's house because she obviously was aware of the story. She used to live in the house as well. She was aware of all the things that were going on. So we packed
Mm-hmm.
a few overnight things, and we decided to make the 30-minute journey to my mother-in-law's house.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, well, we're not in our house now. We're going to be safe for the night. We're going to pick up the medium tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. You know,
Uh-oh.
what can happen overnight? What can happen overnight? So we go there. We sit down. We explain what's happened, and obviously we're invited to stay for the evening. So we sat up with family probably till about 1:30 in the morning. They were
Mm-hmm.
sort of like night owls, and they were watching the TV, and then they went to bed at 1:30 and thought, well, we'll go to bed now. And our bedroom for the night was a downstairs converted garage. It was converted into a bedroom, so that's
Yeah.
where we stayed. So 1:30 in the morning, we go to bed. We left the light on for some reason. We left a side lamp on, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
normally do because I like it dark. And we left the
Mm-hmm.
side lamp on. Went to sleep 1:30 in the morning. This was now the 9th of February 2009 in our time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a time that I now know to be 3:30 in the morning, so 2 hours after.
Mm-hmm.
I consciously remember going back to what I would describe as a small wooden creaky bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually looking at that bedroom as if I was sitting or lying on a bed at the far side of the room. As I looked, there was a window which was covered by blue curtains in front of me. And
Mm-hmm.
in the corner, in the right hand corner of the room, there was a wooden door. At
Mm-hmm.
that point, I heard the wooden door creak open. And as the wooden door opened, almost like an old cottagey type door,
Yeah.
as the wooden door opened, the draft made the blue curtains move.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I heard the voice of a young girl say, "He's here."
Oh
And
God.
at that point, I was back in my time, and I was absolutely screaming in hysterics. I was shaking uncontrollably, absolutely screaming. And
Oh.
my wife, Sarah, just, if you imagine, the worst horror movies,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. No, I
and,
hear
and,
you.
and my wife was trying to calm me down, and this was putting her into a panic. So we now sort of both panicking. But the ironic thing is that the volume that my voice was, we should have been heard by the other household, and nobody did.
Wow.
So that happened, and
Hold on a sec. I've got to jump in there. Do you think the young spirit Sarah was taking you back to experience to connect you to what happened?
that's exactly what happened. And consciously, I basically went back to the scene of the crime as a remote
I'm
viewer
with you. Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
to to see what had happened.
Okay.
So at that point, obviously, when I eventually come round and I'd come back into the room, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
we decided, we were absolutely petrified, and I was absolutely just vibrating and buzzing from head to toe, all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, look, we're gonna have to get up. And we were so scared that we turned on all the lights downstairs in the mother-in-law's house.
Yes.
Everywhere we went as a twosome. We had to stop together. Uh,
Yeah.
and we waited until about 7 a.m. when family woke up and got up, and it was my mother-in-law and her partner, and we
Mm-hmm.
basically explained what had happened. My wife's sister probably because he's a teacher, and she round about school time, she'd come round, and as I was describing the incident to her, she began to
Mhm.
feel very unwell and began to take on a lot of the symptoms that I had felt, and she had to walk out of the house because it was sort of being transferred over to her.
Wow.
So we then, now that I'd arranged for the medium to be collected, she's 40 minutes away. I arranged for it to be collected. Uh, just as we're about, or I'm literally on the driveway to get into my car to go and pick her up, she calls me up and says, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," and hung up.
Oh
And
God.
I called her back and said, "Something happened in the early hours of the morning. You are going to help us, and I am coming there now." So we got in the car, we drove the 40 minutes. As we pulled up at her house, she was very, very agitated on the doorstep.
Uh-huh.
And we could physically see that she was agitated on the doorstep with the door closed behind her. And as she saw our car, she didn't go back in the house. She came straight to the car, and we said, what's the matter? We can see there's something wrong. But what has happened?" She said, "Well, I've been a medium now for X amount of years." She did give this specific number, but I can't remember. But it was a long, long
Yeah.
time. And she said this is the first time that she'd had to leave her house, which is what had happened to us, obviously, the previous evening.
Yeah.
She said she said that morning she went into the kitchen and her washing machine was being lifted off the floor, and it wasn't even on.
Wow.
It was actually floating in the air a
Mhm.
couple of inches off the floor.
Mhm.
She said
Oh wow.
she put a cup of coffee in the kitchen, and when she went in there, she couldn't find it. She came into the living room, and it was on the windowsill with a silver spoon in the coffee cup. So someone had lifted the washing machine, and someone had moved her coffee cup.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she said
Yeah. I
she
can.
said
I can visualize this. Yeah.
she said this is the first time I've had to leave my house, and I've been a medium for however many
Yeah.
years it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So she got in the car, and she'd never been to our house before, so we took her there. And as we were nearing the house, she said, "Excuse me," she says, "We're getting close, aren't we?" And I says, "Yes, we're just round the corner." She said, "Yep, I can feel it in my stomach." So we get into our house, and we're sitting in the living room where we lived, not the mother-in-law's house, because this is our house now.
Mhm.
And we're sitting there and we're chatting, and she said, "Sarah's just walked in." She'd walked in through the front door, but without opening it. She just walked in, and she
Yeah.
said, she's telling me she's cold and she's got no shoes on. So Sarah Jensen, the spirit girl, 14-year-old spirit girl, is now standing in the living room with the medium, myself, and my wife Sarah. And the
Mhm.
medium is now verbatim telling us the story. And the story is this, but it has a twist at the end. The story
Okay.
that she conveyed to us was this young girl used to be abused by her stepfather in the full knowledge of her mother.
Okay.
One evening, the stepfather entered the room and tried to abuse her. She tried to fight and struggle with him. He put his hand over her mouth and nose to keep her quiet and accidentally killed her.
Oh my God.
This is what I'd witnessed because I'd
Yeah.
gone back to that room and I'd witnessed him walking in to that room.
Mhm. Mhm.
So she's telling us that this is what happened and it was all covered up, and she can't rest. She's a restless spirit and she can't go anywhere until her story has been revealed.
Uh huh.
So she's telling us this, and I said, well, just out of interest, we couldn't find anything by that name for that area at all.
Mhm.
What date are we talking? And the medium went silent for probably 3 or 4 seconds. She turned around and said, the year 1850. So we're
Oh.
now talking 159 years prior to that day. She said
Wow.
the reason that you smelt flowers was because it was the anniversary of her passing. It was the 9th of February 1850. And I said, well, that's why we couldn't find anything, because we hadn't got anywhere near back far enough.
Yeah.
We were looking for roundabouts, at the very latest, the 1940s, around about the Second World War. And this was the year 1850, Victorian England.
Yeah.
And what then happened was a kind of twist. Is she said, and you've also got the stepfather with you. This was
Oh.
the assailant. Now he was the one who had been desperately trying to split my wife and I up by causing negativity, by causing arguments that we never ordinarily had. We were so close that we never argued.
Yeah, that happens. That does happen. So hold on a second, get the picture now. So as I mentioned before, the hands coming out for the girl. I mean, obviously, the young girl Sarah is for 150 human years had been an earthbound spirit trying to get this information out, but at the same time, the perpetrator, the man that killed her, the abuser, was in the house as well, trying to stop you and putting his negativity on the. I mean, I've heard this so many times of spirits affecting relationships in a house. It's so common. I mean, that is, oh my Lord, I can't wait to hear what did the medium do next. Oh my Lord.
Well, we discovered that he was the one that had been smashing windows and causing the negativity that was literally causing myself and my wife to be arguing.
Yes.
And as I say, we never did that, but the arguments were quite negative and quite abrupt. Yeah. And she said, "My God, he's big. He's a big man," and he basically been chasing Sarah in the spirit world and trying to prevent her from getting her story out, because he basically covered it up at the time and he wanted it to remain covered up. And she basically said that he was extremely big. She said to him, look, because there was actually photos of my wife and I on the wall, which really demonstrated how close a unit we were. And she was talking to him saying, look how close they are. You're not going to split these up. And she said he's walking closer and closer, and I'm having to back off. He's really, really in my face, and he's really not happy, and he's very, very big. He's a very, very big man. What happened from that point? She sent Sarah on her way, but before she went, through the medium, she turned around and said, "Thank you. I am sorry, and my favourite colours are pink and lilac." And I thought, well, okay, I get the thank you and the sorry, but what's pink and lilac got to do anything? But I was to find out. My favourite colours are pink and lilac. So she led Sarah on her way. She didn't want to go back. She was frightened. She was going back to the family that had stood by and allowed her to be abused. But nevertheless, she went.
She went into what is deemed what we call today the light. Out of, because she was in the perpetual cycle and she couldn't get out of it. Now that a story's been told and it's out there, she was able to go, and but not obviously not with the family members that allowed this to happen. Is that how the medium expressed it when she went?
She did. She said she'd walked her into, as I say, for want of a better expression, she'd walked her halfway into the light, and she'd actually
I'm with you.
Reluctantly she'd gone, even though she had reservations. She'd gone. She then had to turn her attention on the man who gave his name as John Berkshire. And this was the stepfather who had obviously killed Sarah Jensen. Now, he wouldn't go. He really wouldn't go. And the medium had the fight of her life, and she had to summon help from people she knew in the spirit world to get this energy, this spirit to go to get out of wherever he was. It was such a struggle for her. that subsequently she was ill for 6 months, and
Gosh.
really, really physically shattered her. It was a really, really strong, energetic presence,
Hmm.
and but eventually, somehow, they got him to go, and he went. And from that point, really, it was, my God, what has just happened? What has just happened to us? And we,
Yeah.
we basically witnessed an exorcism of sorts,
Hmm.
and it's like, what has happened? So obviously, we were sort of in in Wonderland, in no man's land, down the rabbit hole, all of these emotions in our
Yeah, I
head.
can imagine. Yeah.
And
I mean, when you look at, I mean, we've got to say, for most people that don't encounter or don't experience the paranormal, the ghosts and things like that, it's a hard, thing to swallow. But when you're in such a fearful position, and you experience that, the effects it must have had on you and your wife. I mean, mediums are used to things like this, they do recover. But however, at that point, how were you and your wife feeling once this gentleman was managed to be transitioned? How were you feeling? I mean, your whole life must have changed from that point on.
well, how we were feeling, and subsequently, I couldn't go to bed at night for 6 or 7 months
Oh,
without leaving the light on,
yeah,
because
yeah.
both Sarah, my wife, and I were scared that every
Yes,
time we closed our eyes, we were going
yes.
back to that place. And it
Yes,
took,
no, I hear you. I mean, yeah, I am. I still sleep with a hallway light on, and even though I'm a medium, I had some scary shit as a child, and always in the dark, and I always still leave a light on. It's an irrational fear. I'm a medium, hello, but I still do. I still do. But I mean, how did you get through that, both of you together? I mean, the trauma of that is like post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm telling you. I
it
mean,
is, it is, and again, because we were both police officers, we deal, we were dealing, and we still were police
yeah,
officers at the time. We're
yeah,
dealing with victims of crime day in and day
yeah.
out. Now, these victims of crime, we know from experience, or we knew from experience, it
Mhm.
takes them years to get over the
Yes,
trauma of being a victim. Now, what I was facing is, when people are normally murdered, then it is the end of physical existence for them. But I saw, or I witnessed, or I relived a murder, but I was still
yes.
alive. I was still alive.
I'm
So
I'm with you. I'm with you, Michael. I mean, I work on cold cases. Well, that was part of my past resume, but I teach cold case um, detection for mediums. And you're making me think. I've never thought this before. It's just come in my head now. All the unsolved murders and all these spirits in this loop, unable, that are earthbound because of the trauma of a violent death. I mean, if police officers knew, oh my God, I mean,
no,
makes you
absolutely.
think of how many are still on the earth plane, stuck,
Yeah.
trying to get somebody's attention because they can't move on until this truth has come out. It makes you think, does it not?
It certainly does, and again, certainly in the police, you only deal with physical victims.
Yeah,
You have no clue that beyond
no,
that physical victim, there's a spiritual
no,
victim that is still attached to that
yeah,
experience. And
yeah.
you know, as I say, it took 6 or 7 months for me to be able to switch the light
Gosh.
off, and then
Mm,
we had the joy of going into to work a couple of days later, still absolutely in a wreck, and
yeah.
going in a private room with our inspector and our sergeants, who were the supervisors of our team, and
Hmm.
tell them what had happened to us. Now,
Oh gosh.
the inspector turned around and said, I don't necessarily understand what you're saying. My wife is deeply into this, but I'm not. So I don't
Mm,
understand what you're saying to me. But I know you both well enough to realize that something has happened,
yeah,
because the way that we walked into that office, we were sent home. It was like,
yeah.
you're not fit for duty. You must go home, and that's
Yeah.
really what we got in for, to explain. And the inspector said, I don't understand what you're saying, but I know you as people, and I know
Hmm.
something has happened to you.
Yeah.
And we went home, and we lived our life as best we could. A couple of days after that, we went out for the day just for a change of scenery, just to do something different, and
Hmm.
locked all up as we normally did. And when we got back home, when we opened the door, there was an artificial pink and lilac flower that had been left
Oh.
inside the house. So that takes us back
Oh.
to my favourite colours are pink and lilac, and I do still have the flower. And this
That's
had been left. This
beautiful.
this had been left by Sarah to say, I'm okay, because that.
And thank you.
And thank
Yeah.
you. It wasn't ours. I can assure you, it wasn't there before we left the house. It was
Yeah.
put there after the house was empty. The door was
Hmm.
locked, and we'd gone out for the day. And
No.
sometime between going out and coming back,
Yeah.
she'd come back and left an artificial flower.
I
So as I
mean,
say, that
that is beautiful. I mean, that is just that is it just shows you the trauma that the spirits still emotional trauma they still go through even after the physical body has died, when they die in a traumatic death that I don't think anyone even thinks about at all. I know when I work on cold cases, as a medium, you experience a lot of it. But your ghost story tonight is really giving me a deeper, more humbling respect for the work of mediumship. Because it's just that is just amazing. I've got to jump in there and say, did this experience, as much as it was traumatic, my point of view is, out of everything that we perceive to be negative is a learning, and something good will come out of it, or some change. Did you or your wife after that start sensing spirit or connecting to the greater consciousness after this experience?
well, certainly leading up to this experience, we were both seeing a lot of strange things in the sky, and this it was sort of being, I guess, being drip fed a little bit, and for
Uh,
this incident.
when you say, hold on, Michael, when you say strange things in the sky, because it's a common phenomena, if you see a UFO, paranormal events kick in straight afterwards. Was it UFOs you saw in the sky?
Absolutely, it was all kinds
Yeah,
of UFOs. We
yeah,
went
yeah,
we went on a city break to Rome, and we saw one over the Colosseum. We'd
yeah,
we'd see them on duty in
yeah,
the police on night duty. We'd see
yeah.
UFOs of all shapes. We'd see massive cigar-shaped UFOs in daylight.
Yes, I'm with
We
you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we saw, when we were on night duty in the same patrol car, we looked up at the sky and actually saw a dimensional portal opening in the sky and a UFO coming out of it. And
Hmm.
this were a couple of weeks before this. We'd been on a day trip to Stonehenge, and some people suggest that because of what Stonehenge really is, it may well have contributed to opening up certain
Yeah,
things.
yeah. I'm aware of many, and my own personal experience. Each time I had contact, and there was a certain period in my life that was 23 years ago, exactly. Not 23 years ago, 13 years ago, and onward. The encounters, as massive encounters of UFO sightings and encounters with contact, the paranormal activity and spirits in my home, it just tripled. It tripled each one. And I'm hearing this from many people, that the spirit world opens to them, the communication after UFO sightings. So it is, I think it's evidenced by the majority of people that have experienced it, personal experiences. What
Mm.
about after, you've been in the police station, that you've been sent home to rest, to go out? Did the paranormal experiences stop totally, or did it open you up to something else?
Well, subsequently, we both resigned from our occupation within a couple of weeks of each other and never actually went back.
Oh
So
gosh.
you can see how much of an
Yes.
impact that this kind of thing.
Yes.
It's difficult to express in words, but if you
Yeah.
imagine two police officers that have just been basically kicked out of their careers, you know,
Yeah.
they can't sleep without the light on,
Hmm.
And as I say, some of the things from a human perspective, I saw everything there was to see, and dealt with everything there is to deal with. But I'd never
Yeah.
ever could never be
No.
prepared for what
For
had
this,
happened.
no. Who would
And
be prepared for that? Because it's obviously when it's in the physical world, it's like humans, all the trauma and everything you witness. You can prepare. You know how to react. You know who your enemy is, so to speak. And you know how to respond, get support, get help. But when you're dealing with the spirit world and you experience something like this, there is only you. And absolutely, I mean, that's just your mind can't even compute how one would respond to that on your own. Um, so you've given up your job. So hold on, this looks like it's going to lead somewhere. After you both resigned from the police force, that no doubt I suspect you were going to stay in for the full whack, were you initially?
no, absolutely. I mean, it was a 30-year career, and I got to year 17.
Mm.
So 5 years from now, I would have been retired. But yes, it was my first marriage. I was addicted to the place. I was addicted to the career, and
Yeah,
if you imagine someone with that kind of love for their job,
yeah,
it's going to
yeah.
take quite a lot to price you out of it. So you
Oh
can
God,
imagine
yeah,
the kind of effect, and the two of us as well to leave that to go into nothing, and it certainly did build up because again we continued to see paranormal things in the sky. We began, we go to people's houses and we'd bring attachments back with us, and they'd make their presence known, shall we say, by by by
yeah,
by, by things being thrown across the room. uh, and we sort of learned how to clear them and send them on. So we basically we became kind of gatekeepers and cleansers really, and help
yeah, yeah,
a lot of spirits that would attach themselves to us, and we'd send
yeah.
them on. And that then developed into, these sightings of UFOs just continued, for
Mhm.
a long time. But other things then became part of the mix as well.
Yeah.
And we decided in 2010, which was literally less than a year after this Sarah Jensen incident, that we wanted to go on holiday, and we both decided we had a strong feeling we needed to go to Egypt, but we realised that it was going to be more than just a holiday. There was
Yeah.
something we needed to be there for. And
Yeah.
about 10 days before we went, I had a strange email from a psychic medium from Scotland who I didn't know me. And
Hmm.
she basically said that she had a message from her spiritual council. And she started talking about the Sphinx. You're going to get certain knowledge from the Sphinx. It's going to be added to your toolbox. Eventually, you would have to learn it, understand it, and then teach it. So
Yeah.
again, we started to get these strange messages now when we're going to go on holiday.
Yeah.
uh, and that's really it sort of increased in advancement really. And then I said the UFOs continued, the spirit
Hmm.
world continued. I now, certainly me from my perspective, I now had ancient mysteries being disclosed to me, and seeing
Yeah.
mathematical formulas in my head, and seeing, should we say, advanced technology in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
house, and being allowed to see it. And it was really opening up, and to be told that from the time you were born you were chosen. So
I'm with you. Yeah. I'm with you.
regardless of what I would have been doing, regardless of where I would have been doing it, or who with, this was timed. This was always going to happen.
Exactly. Going. It's the script has been written. I mean, so you can look at this story as I've heard these experiences so many, and it is my truth. It's just my truth as well. From such traumatic experience, there it's UFOs. It's this comes first. I'm just minimizing it right down for basic understanding. Then the paranormal opens, and there's even discussion that's quite open today, and I'm open for it, that UFOs in the spirit world, it's all one, connected under one umbrella. But then there's a life change that comes, a life change to the person that experienced it. But it opens you up to the rest of the spirit world. Light bulbs are on. I mean, yeah, I have development groups where I teach me, well, I don't teach them, just guide them through the mediumship. And the more they open up, more paranormal, and they experiencing ET contact as well, UFO sightings. And when you look back, the work that you do now, and I know about your books, and I've had you on my other shows with about your life experiences and the information that's come in. And when you look back now at the experience that you had, as traumatic as it was, that stopped you and your wife's career in the police force, was it worth it?
Well, once these kind of things happen to you, you can never go back to everyday
No,
life.
no.
You cannot unsee what you've seen. You cannot unhear what you've heard.
Mhm.
So it was impossible. I was a different person, and so was she. So
Yeah.
we couldn't have gone back to the same place. It just would. It
No.
was no longer compatible.
Yeah.
And I also, talking about it, it seems to have a sort of very, very similar modus operandi that I also became an ET contactee, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would see them come through mirrors, literally as
Hmm.
portals, and
Yeah.
stand next to me, and
Yeah.
have lots and lots of messages, uh,
Hmm.
confirming, validating things that I'd thought as an idea, and
Hmm.
just give me little tips as to, okay, you've asked for the answer for this, well,
Yeah.
just look into this, and I did, and I found the answer. So it's always kind of been guided, and
Yeah.
I always felt like anybody else who's been prepped for this kind of thing,
Hmm.
always felt that there's always something there. There's always some hand steering,
Yeah.
and that really really became more and more evident when I look back at some of the things that have happened in my life. So was it all worth it? Well, it certainly feels like it was worth it. It's happened for a reason, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
kind of things that I'm able to talk about now and help people with, and
Yeah.
the a lot of the things that I talk about is the ancient hidden messages that were left for humanity.
Hmm.
And when you talk about extraterrestrials and UFOs, basically my view is that extraterrestrials are largely advanced spiritual humans who have come back to help
Well,
us.
yeah. I mean, it's something that I touched upon earlier on. I mean, it's so you could write a handbook now. It's really because everyone's talking about it. We've had 2 years of podcasts and shows, something else to do but to share our truths. But this ET contact and the spirit world um, are sort of hand in hand with each other. It's one. And the conversation is, I mean, as I'm a rescue medium, I don't go on platform, I go rescue medium, which is maybe a bit like what your medium did, and with humans as well. um, and it's something that links in with ET. It runs parallel, the contact with it. And I think it's a way of awakening the individual conscious being. Everyone, normally by trauma, I don't know why. I have a feeling you can't avoid what we live in a 3D polarity, a world of what we call dark and light. We have to have a polarity. If we don't experience, I mean, trauma and that side, the darker side, we have no understanding of the other side, or what we don't want to be, or what we don't want to experience, that opens us up consciously. And there's many ET experiences, not never mind the paranormal that comes later, that in the beginning deemed it as a negative experience, but later on say it was the best thing ever happened to me because I'm experiencing something totally different. So I always say my best teachers were the spirit world and some humans that brought me to where I am today. But you've raised a really important question today. I'm going to repeat myself. Even though I work on cold cases in teaching cold cases, how to work at psychic detective, I've never really, and I worked with victims of crime in my human job role before, of serious crime. I never really looked at the spirit well. Can you believe it? Until you've just shared this, that the trauma of some of these spirits, I'm aware, as in my job role as a rescue medium, that they're trying to get attention, so things do happen. But the case still needs to be solved, Michael, even from the spirit world. Is that correct?
It is correct, because when you look into earthbound spirits, they sometimes will not leave for certain reasons.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is possessions, it is attachments to possessions.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is unfinished business, and
Yeah.
this was very, very much unfinished business. So I've seen,
Gosh.
the ghosts and the spirits of people. I've even seen the ghost of King Charles I.
Hmm.
I've seen the spirits of animals, and I've
Hmm.
seemingly, what is very rare, I've also seen quite a lot of the ghosts and spirits of insects, which is
Yeah.
quite rare.
Yeah.
Now, when going back to the duality that you were saying, is when unity separates, you have to have
Hmm.
polarity. You have
Yes.
a manifest and an unmanifest state that live in simultaneous existence. So
Absolutely.
when you have, for arguments, life is manifest, but
Hmm.
death is simultaneously unmanifest around it. So when they
Hmm.
swap positions, then
Hmm.
death becomes manifest and life becomes
Yeah.
unmanifest.
Yeah.
And there is always a part that remembers a particular experience on a
Mhm.
particular timeline. That are spirits, and these spirits, sometimes their experience whilst they were here is an absolute reality for them. It is still happening.
It's still happening. They're in the loop. They're in the loop. And then you could, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, we as alive spirit beings, because we're spirit as well, um, we do what we say, we do the work on ourselves, the trauma, we work on ourselves to let it go. Um, you had a teenager, a 14-year-old with the same personality, same reactions. So, the temper tantrum teenager, but that's been abused. I mean, obviously, that's my background. So I know exactly. I mean, if I died as a teenager, I would have been just like her, no doubt. Um, you've got that they still need to do the work and heal themselves, because you raised what you raised again earlier on. The conversation I've been having lately is, are we were we originally the ETs that came and had the human experience, and when the physical body of that goes, the blueprint is still there, which is the spirit. Does that make sense? And the work still needs to be done. Does that
It
make
does.
sense, or have I complicated it?
No, no, it makes perfect sense. Certainly for me, is when you look at the ancient text and the ancient
Mm,
mentions of such. When you've worked on yourself and you become the most complete third dimensional human being you can be, you are
mm-hmm,
no longer compatible with a vibration of Earth. So you
mm-hmm,
continue your journey in different star systems, in different bodies, in etc.
mm-hmm,
Now, when you look at lots of ETs that have come back to help humanity, they
mm-hmm.
are advanced spiritual humans of the past.
Yes.
So it makes sense, because we have a genetic line to them. They were
Mm-hmm.
us, that they've come back to help us. So
Yes.
these ETs are advanced spiritual humans that have come back to help. And
Mm-hmm,
when you look at the likes of Rendlesham Forest and different encounters, which was the Air Force base in the 1980s,
mm-hmm,
there's obviously a lot of argument over the validity of it. But nevertheless,
mm-hmm,
one of them officially documented that it spoke to someone from the craft. And he
mm-hmm,
said, this was an American airman, "Who
mm-hmm.
are you? Who are you?" And they said, "We are you in the future."
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. So, this is the discussion I'm having about the spirits recently. What's happening is that we call them ET, but the fact their spirit in a different conscious form. They're advanced spirit. They've been here, done it, did it, gone, and advanced. So it's a cycle within itself of you can call it, I don't know, the soul of one, or lineage or something. But I have no issue with that. I mean, that even opens the door. If you go out with this sort of like open mind, um, I mean, I've had experiences, definitely last year when I was in a group, and spirit was coming in. I had spirit and ET because I'm a visual, in my front room. I liked what you saw with the room. I see that when I spirit comes through, so I get the whole package. And I was going, why are you both together? That was a year ago. Why the energies are different? Yes, they are. But that was a door opening for me. That the two of them were together in my presence, the spirit wanting the reading, and there was what we call ET. But your explanation that these are higher spiritual beings, they were us from the past or our future, just makes perfect sense, because this is the common thread we're talking now. ET and the spirit realms are exactly the same thing.
That they are, and if you imagine that at the moment, I am matter with a human consciousness. They are
Yeah,
matter with an astral brain, shall we say?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
the astral brain is the part that
yeah,
allows astral travel, remote viewing, which is what I
yeah,
did.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I've also had other sort of ancient visitations where it is described as spiritual concentration, where you can
yeah,
actually look through their eyes when you're not them.
yeah.
So I've
No,
also
I'm with
experienced that
you.
as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I tell you what, excuse me, I coughed there. I posed a question. There's a show coming up, and it's asking for questions, and I've posed this question, and it really touches upon this discussion tonight. This ghost story. Are these experiences happening? So that, and why are they, like, why are they happening? Is it because we are remembering who we are? We are the ET. We are the ET, which is the spirit. It is the spirit. Because if you ask the question, when we all say, "Oh, I consciously came here to have," I'm a conscious being, a spiritual being. I've come here to have a human experience. Well, who the hell were you before you come here in 3D dimension?
Yeah.
Where were you? Who were you? And it's really, I'm thinking, it's ET. We are the ETs, and the
We are.
contact in the spirit world and how it works. That, like, we have to go through a certain, we're born, we grow, we have to go through linear. Then who's to say it can't be the same way, that we come in as these beings, we take on the human experience. When the physical body dissipates, we go back to the original form, but we still got the blueprint of the human being experience that still needs to be worked through. I'm
That's
trying to
right.
say something that's so hard to articulate, but do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. What we sometimes have, and certainly what I have, is what is known as a conscious self memory. So some of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I see are things that I recognise innately
Yeah,
because I've seen them before. And when
yeah,
you talk about what you just spoke about, and you can take
yeah.
that back to, they were telling us this in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
because when it says that we come from dust and we return to dust, people
Mm-hmm.
think that it's the skin fragments that you sneeze on that are in the house that is dust. When you look
Yeah.
at Hebrew,
Mm-hmm.
dust means light particles.
Yeah.
So we come from light particles and we return to light
Yeah.
particles. And that even the Bible we had this conversation, is telling us this. So we are from the original unity that fragmented to
Yeah.
experience. Now when you have everything, and you must have nothing simultaneously. So in
Mm-hmm.
order for nothing to become everything, it has to experience everything. So
Yes.
you have to have a manifest and unmanifest simultaneous existence. It cannot be any
Absolutely.
other way.
Yeah. I resonate with that. And another thing that just come to mind through this discussion, um, it's like a 3 in 1. Again, I always get the 3 in 1. It always comes up because you have, we name it ET, but it's a higher spiritual being. Yeah.
Yeah.
And comes in, has the human experience. So here we have part 2, the identity, Gloria, the identity, Michael. And then when this body dissolves, then there's part 3, the spirit. It may not be high yet, but it's on a journey. It's on a perpetual journey. Yeah. And it could be that you need to come back and be a human again, or it could be, but it's only the one source, or you're going to the higher realms of ET. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a topic of discussion I love, and I have it often, and I try to pose these questions. But this connection with the spirit world and what we call ET, because we put things in boxes. We have ET, or some people call them dimensional being. It doesn't really matter. And we have the spirit world. But now it just seems like it's us, the blueprint of our original journey. We will experience all different things in all different civilizations. We experience all things at all times in all places. Maybe it's just that.
Well,
It's as simple as that.
when you talk about 3 in 1 or 1 in 3, then
Mm,
when creation or the creative force, the creative energy,
mhm,
recognizes itself within creation, it
mhm.
manifests in the third dimension as a triangle. So that
Yeah,
is the original 3 in 1 or 1 in 3. That is the original
yeah,
Trinity, which is the
yeah,
recognizer, the
yeah,
recognition, and the recognized. That
yeah.
is when you then take the triangle into a third dimensional, you then look at a
Mhm,
pyramid. You then begin to
mhm.
start to realize where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the original creative force recognizes itself, becomes a 3 in 1, which is the triangle.
yeah.
So when it becomes out of the dimensionless state,
Mhm,
beyond time and space into the third dimension, it also
mhm.
gives the appearance of the number 4, which is the square. The
Yeah.
square is truth. God is truth. Why was
Mhm,
Christ a carpenter? Because carpenters use squares
mhm,
to truth their angles. They write their
mhm,
angles with squares. So do builders. It is called truthing. They use
mhm,
squares to do their buildings. It is truthing. So the square is the truth. God is truth. Christ is the carpenter, which is the square, which is truth. When you add the triangle and the square, you get the number 7, which is
mhm,
the mystical key to the third dimension.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
So it's
I'm
what we're
with you.
talking
I'm
about.
with you. I mean, it's just the more you. I mean, for me, it just comes through knowing and realization. And then on the audience, you may have to listen to this a few times where we're going. But that in itself validates the theory, um, that the spirit that you encountered is basically you, having another experience, part of you, a fractal of you, going through the process from the blueprint. And it's now posing another question for me. What do you think? So if we say the realization that we have a very similar realization on this area. Um, what does that mean now? We're consciously bringing this out and sharing this. What do you think that means? I mean, it keeps taking me back, and I've mentioned this on a show previously when I've touched upon this discussion. I mean, I'm just having a discourse here. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just having a conversation. Is you hear in like scriptures, not just biblical, ancient civilizations, a time when the dead will rise, and we know the dead cannot rise, as in physical dead, but however, the spirits are the dead. What we label the dead is. Does that make sense to you? And at the same time, the return of the gods. So it's all out there. It just makes it this script that we've written from the beginning. And do you see where I'm going with this? It's like an epic movie. Do you know what I mean?
Well, absolutely. And the thing was, when you look at these ancient texts and these ancient scriptures, that they are telling us
Mhm.
just that. Now, the dead is really the mind of flesh. It is the ignorant. So when you
Yeah,
say that the dead will rise, it's talking about ignorance will be transformed into
yeah,
enlightenment.
yeah,
And
yeah.
when you look at the things that have been written and hidden inside the Great Pyramid, they
Hmm.
speak of a seventh civilization who are the flame bearers of Earth, in other words, the knowledge keepers. And they also talk about a sixth civilization which began with the metaphorical Adam and
Hmm.
will end very soon. And because ancient knowledge was always timed for what I know now to be, looking at the Egyptian star codes, it was ancient knowledge that was timed to re-emerge on the 17th 360 year cycle of the Hebrew calendar, which began in 2001. So now is the time that all of this information is meant to come alive. And when you start looking at the schism that we're now seeing between those who are seeing reality for what it is and those who are still just identifying with matter, just the
Yeah.
body. Now, those who are just identifying with the body, just identifying with matter, running a planet for profit, looking, we made 5 billion this year, so we must make 10 billion next year. Well, that is Satan, because Satan is the lord of matter. So when we fell from a celestial place to a terrestrial place, we sacrificed ourselves, and we will return back to the mind of spirit. So God is the Lord of spirit, Satan is the Lord of matter. Both are complementary halves in the polarity of reality.
So on the journey, hold horses here. On the journey, I mean, I know from my truth is, I'm sorry, I'm echoing again. It's a spirit world. The focus of self-realization is to drop all human belief system, concepts, ethics, whatever, Trevor. The whole lot has to go. And it makes one think that is a process of this journey, that if for some reason through the script that's been written, you were murdered or died beforehand, the process still has to go on. So the spirit world, it justifies why Sarah had to release what she let go for the process you've just spoken about. Does that make sense, Joe? I'm trying to get this out. It's so hard to articulate. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. What we have at the moment is a ruling race that is only interested in power for personal gain. It is only interested for monetary value for personal gain, not for the good of all. They are purely just identifying with the body, with matter. When you do that, you will never rise from the dead. So when we come into through the Holy Grail, through the womb, which we must do to come to this, we fall. We have to fall from a celestial place to a terrestrial place. So we have to be born in the stable, put it in biblical terms, because this is what they're telling us. So the virgin is the soul that is purified of earthly dross, who is able to take the divine seed, the divine child. That divine child is born in a stable, which is a metaphor for a world of animalistic nature. So that divine child grows up in the stable. Now, you use the energies of certain stars, the zodiac stars, in order to enhance and amplify that divine growth. So you use largely the energies of Capricorn. So that is why the Bible tells us that Christ was born in a stable in December, because that is the sign of the goat, that is Capricorn. So the goat, contrary to what you are told, is a symbol for the divine child. That's why we call children kids.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm just trying to do the inference with the spirit world, because I'm going to well, the ghostly world, is because what also has been raised a lot, I've become aware of, and it's obviously others have experienced it too. This transition, whatever's happening now with the paranormal, ET contact, and the ghosts, and the work that the earthbound spirits are doing on themselves as well, is we're coming to a period. I mean, if you've been in mediumship for many years, they're here all the time. You see them and you just switch off, but they walk past you, just like if you're going in a shopping center. Yeah, they're there, you hear them, you switch off, you shut down. But it's becoming more and more, I'm hearing from others that they're noticing spirits, like there's emergence between the 3D and the spirit, the 3D spirit, so to speak, and with the ET. So really, I understand what you're saying from that part of it, but it does actually bear a lot of relation to the ghost stories we're talking about tonight. And for others that have had spooky, stories, in your case, post-traumatic stress disorder afterwards, that there is, I wanted to say light at the end of the tunnel. I don't want to say that. It's just too cliche, isn't it? There's a process, I think, I call it the spiritual apocalypse, but we are spirit. We will connect back to spirit. And I feel at the moment, even before the physical body dissipates, I'm trying to word it very cautiously here. So we love ghost stories, do we not? Everyone loves the ghost stories. Everyone loves the experience, and we try to understand, because it gives us to a part of a reflection to who am I? How do I look at my own mortality? You with me? In the past we do have ancient texts on this, like you were saying, but in the current times now, I think the ghost stories, the paranormal, the spiritual world is like shouting out as much to us here in this incarnation as much as ET is, because they're aware as well of the events coming. Does that make
Absolutely,
sense?
it does. I mean, what we have in this manipulated world is daily struggles. Now, daily struggles take you further and further and further into matter,
Mm,
so far that you can't even see the shore anymore. So you don't even realize that there's a spirit world,
yeah, you don't
and
you don't know. Yeah. Mm,
they are trying to get our attention because they are trying to help us to raise ourselves. And what you must also learn is respect for these spirits as well, because they are a conscious
yeah.
entity, and you must have respect for them. And some of the the paranormal ghost shows that I see just show complete disrespect for
I mean, it's
a
very
living
dangerous to
consciousness.
do that. It is.
Yes.
It's very, very dangerous to do that. um just because they're in spirit, it doesn't mean, as Michael's experience and many others I know, doesn't mean there won't be retribution. And I don't I remember seeing clips of these shows, and I know what you're talking about. You need reverence and respect. We are spirit. Let's use that label. We are not human beings, we are spirit. We're conscious spirits. And I do agree with you. And I think a backlash could come there. However, can I just, before we close, I mean, this is just so interesting. It always is with you. We've gone way over the hour, but it's my show. It doesn't matter. Is you're looking at, how we react to spirit is paramount. I mean, in your case, yes, you were scared. But really, coming from my perspective, I'd say really needed your attention, needed you to get a medium, and that medium needed to really be the hero, which she was, obviously. Um, Many experience this and they perpetuate it and make it worse because of the disrespect or I mean, would you look at Sarah, this beautiful 14-year-old girl that was abused? Would you look at her as an evil entity? No, no, you wouldn't, would you? The demon, you wouldn't.
No.
No.
Absolutely.
However, even the gentleman, the perpetrator who carried out the act, he is still conscious spirit, and he needed the help, and the medium gave it for him to cross through, to work through what he. Does this make sense to you, Michael?
That's exactly what happened. So it makes perfect sense. And and unless you have self control and understanding about what you're doing, then you
Yeah.
should not enter into
Oh gosh, yeah,
it's because you're often making it worse. And the
yeah.
amount of people that I hear saying, "Oh, we're going to Glastonbury this weekend to clear the land," but you don't know what you're doing. You're making it worse,
No,
and that is why Glastonbury is probably one of the darkest places there is. So
I'm telling you, people are saying the energies around Stonehenge have changed. I don't go there. I want to come back to something you just reminded me before we end the podcast, because this is, I love the resonance between us. Is you mentioned this out of the blue Scottish medium phoned you and said about when you go to Egypt, blah blah blah, and you said that, yeah. I had a very similar experience from a medium in America. Um, I was talking to her before she was going to come on my show, and I just mentioned the word. I'm going to the Isle of Wight, and her contacts, in the spirit realm said she's the one, and this medium had been drawing this picture one after the other, couldn't stop, and she didn't know what it was. And then she said, "You're going." She sent it to me. "You're going there. This is going to happen. Some amazing things are going to put your hand on it." And it was the long stone on the Isle of Wight. There was no way on God's earth. And this is, when you were saying, I thought, God, that reminds me of my one. And I did go to the Isle of Wight at the Christmas week, and my God, it did happen. And I'm going back next week. But that reminded me well. So you can look at I'm hoping people have, if you're scared, I get that. It's been part of our culture and our programming, because we always fear what we don't understand. And I'm hoping the show tonight and Michael's ghost story with him and his wife, even though at the beginning, no, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, shows you that it's maybe not what you think it is. And we are more connected to these ghosts and spirits. And they're not coming in from somewhere else. They're part of our human experience. And it's part of the script, the journey that we have to go through. Would you agree with that, Michael, before we close, or add something to it?
I certainly would. This was a 14-year-old girl that needed help.
Yeah.
And in helping her, it helped ourselves, because it was an alarm clock that we couldn't switch off, we couldn't ignore. And as a result of helping her, it helped us. It changed our life. And she's now, I know she can sometimes come, but every time I talk about her story, I can feel her presence around me. So she's always here when I tell. And now she's disappeared, but during the story she was here.
Yes, she was
so she needed help, and like anybody in the police, I joined to help people. I didn't expect it to be helping a former person, but nevertheless, it's in my blood, it's in my DNA to help when I can, and we did in a roundabout way. We helped, and all came out good in the end.
There's just one more point. It's open. I'll just throw it out there before we close the show. Is in this world we look for retribution. You commit, you do an act, and we want punishment, and sometimes we want to kill them. It's just horrific. But in the spirit world, it's different. You look at these two spirits. You have we label the victim and the perpetrator, the murderer. And you look how that was resolved in the spirit world. And it reminds me of when I was at university studying youth justice system. They were given analogies of, the Bulger case here and another one in another country. A similar act had happened, and how we treated them here and perpetuated. We fed it here and fed them and fed them and fed them until they grew up exactly as they were with children. But in the other country, I think it was Denmark or somewhere, they had a very similar thing, and the community took responsibility, and the outcome was totally different. And the children healed. It wasn't retribution. I don't know what you would call it. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't send me hate mail, please. But it's just something. Let's not be scared to look at things. If we could, as humans, ditch the belief systems and behave more like spirit, how about that? Maybe that's what I'm saying. In how we deal with things, maybe we'd stand a better chance instead of what we're doing at the moment now. Who knows? So, Michael, I can't thank you enough. It has been an absolutely fascinating ghost story. Next weekend, there will not be a ghost story on the Saturday because I'm traveling off to the little island for 4 days. So it will be the week after, the Saturday after. Michael, this ghost story is now in the book, is it not? would you like to share with the audience if they wish to purchase the book?
Yeah, well, it's an ebook called "When Murder Travels Through Time," which was the most appropriate title I could think of,
Yeah,
and it basically goes a little bit more into the story itself,
yeah.
and how it's basically a release for everyone who was involved. So, for the best way to document anything is to put it into a book form, because then it's there forever,
Okay.
and
Where can
that's
they
actually
get
exactly
hold
what
of
happened.
this?
It's on my website, which is michael-feely.com, Feely, and it's on the list there of ebooks and books.
Okay, that is wonderful, Michael. Michael, stay there. Stay there. Thank you, everybody, for either listening in live or when you watch, listen in the show on the replay at your convenience. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's definitely got me thinking outside the box, and I love it. This is why I love the work that I do, because I get introduced to new theories, concepts, and it allows my mind to open and pose questions like I did with Michael this evening. I'm Gloria, and this is Open Minds Podcast, Waking the Dead Ghost Story. Until the next one, bye for now.